Hi, Sean Campbell here. You're muted. I'm not hearing you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yay. I know you went through a little test run today, so thanks for taking the time to do that.
Yes, Sarah was very professional and very helpful.
Good, good.
Yeah,
She's
good.
she's a she's the office revolutionary, so
Okay.
she,
Okay.
that's the
So,
role she plays. So we like to have her liked having her around.
well, we need a lot of uh, revolutionaries, peaceful, of course,
Yeah,
in view of what
yeah.
happened 2 days ago or whatever.
I
Let's say
just,
Wednesday. Yes, Monday was just horrible listening to all that.
I know it's even when you know it's coming, it's hard to
Well,
accept it's there.
I thought that most of my experience, and even myself, when you're working for something for so long and you're angry about that you don't obtain it, when you finally achieve it, you kind of chill and you kind of feel good. And he just that this was worse than Trump won inauguration.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I don't know if there's any chill to draw on in that makeup.
You know, you're
Um,
probably right. You're probably right.
it
So,
just is. I mean,
so
what I just,
I will get back to you later on. I booked the steps of City Hall for March 9th, where we're going to try to get a lot of people to come and then march over to Brooklyn Bridge because that's the day, the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma.
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm.
did this about 3 or 4 years ago. We had about a few hundred people, but I think this one will be, there'll be more people coming out because it'll be like a month and a half, almost 2 months since he's been in office, and people will start to see the cruelty and what's happening to our country. So we're going to try to get as many people from all over. Maybe we get thousands of people, and then maybe if we get a lot of people, we'll have some rally in Cadman Plaza or something. So
Yeah, keep me posted, and
I
I'm
will.
here to help and participate and tell my kids to participate and do all of that because there was something. I think everybody was so exhausted and maybe still indulging in a little bit of denial that the protests following or on Inauguration Day were just sort of a different. I was there, when it was 8 years ago. Um, and we were in DC on Inauguration Day, and I don't know what the smaller crowds and the fewer protests really mean, but hopefully it means everybody was just gearing up for the long fight.
Well, I think that a lot of calls I got, there are people even talking about leaving the country, and I kept telling everyone you can't. You know, I'll get a court order preventing you from leaving the country. Uh, and but I think people are just they're still depressed because he lost and he won.
Yeah, I
So
think I think too, it's not even the individual. I mean, it's something that my younger daughter said the first time around was, I can't believe I live in a country where so many people would find this person an acceptable president of the United States. So it's sort of the fellow man kind of thing that's also jarring. And the fact that they're creeping up on us in Brooklyn. I mean, I've dealt with that, throughout, especially this job, because well, I work with cops and I've got an Orthodox community and otherwise, conservative community. And my job is not political. So sometimes people don't know where I stand and it gives them this idea that they can say things in front of me. And when I push back, they're like, oh, remember what sanitation worker saying, oh, I didn't realize you were progressive. I always thought you were so smart. And I was like, wait, what?
that's it.
So,
Yeah,
but yeah, the change in the numbers in New York City and Brooklyn in particular are distressing.
yeah, they are. But I
But
grew
here's
up in
Yvette Claire
Brooklyn.
Jean. She's not distressing. She's a breath of fresh air.
Hello, good
Uh,
evening.
Hi, Yvette. How are you?
How are you?
I'm
Yvette
okay.
is one of the co-chairs of this committee, Norman,
Great.
so
Great.
she and Nina Sapir will be leading us. Florencia called me and said that our other presenter from the hospital is not going to be able to join us. She came down with the flu. So we will focus on other approaches to address street unsheltered homeless outreach.
All right.
Okay.
As I tell people, I can go all night on the topic if necessary. And so it's not hard. I've been dealing with this now, 43 years. That was
Is
my
that
first,
all?
1983 was my first. A woman came into our office on the Lower East Side and said she was at a woman's shelter and they were giving her a hard time. And I said, okay, tell me. And then I went to the shelter and I represented her, and that was the beginning of my learning about the failure to address street homelessness. So we can talk a lot about this.
Good deal. We usually, it's funny because people are meeting from home and yet they don't tend to come on until 2 or 3 minutes after.
We can
So
wait.
we'll have the co-chairs kick us off when they're ready, but not before 6:30. So we have 5 minutes.
Okay.
We are
Norman,
also,
do you have a,
we also
sorry, I
record
just
these
wanted to,
meetings. Sorry.
sorry, Sean. I just wanted to ask Norman if he has a presentation to share or if he'll just be speaking.
I'll just be talking with y'all.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm not recording now, but when we get started, this meeting will be recorded and then it's posted on our website so that it's a continuing resource and reference for others.
All right, I got to clean up my language then.
You don't really have to. I mean,
I know,
I
I'm
don't
only
know.
joking.
I don't always succeed in doing that.
I meant I can't cuss. Although sometimes I get angry in response and it comes out because it's words. And some of those words, when I was growing up at PS 131, you'd get really in trouble if you said anything like that. Today, sort of part of the vernacular.
I used to get my mouth washed out with soap.
Really? I've always heard that, but I never heard anyone who actually
Yeah.
did that. That must
Mm-hmm.
be horrible.
It
I've
didn't
heard,
work either.
right, I've heard people
Sean,
who
good
said they
evening,
were
everyone.
threatened with that.
That's my girl. Right. Hey, Gail.
Hi, Florencia. Hi, Sean. Hi, Yvette and Norman.
Hi, Yvette. Hi, Nina. Hi, everyone. Mr. Siegel. Oh, Sean, it had to be you, right?
Didn't happen that often.
There we go. Hi, Sherry. Sherry's one of our terrific volunteers.
Oh, good. We look forward to hearing from you
She
too.
does Washington Square Park. And
An
we actually
interesting-
have an intern from Edgar Evers College, Madeline, who said she's going to try to join us to observe. So,
Great.
and then if there's any follow-up, Madeline then could do some of the follow-up as well as myself and Sherry. All right. How long does the committee meeting generally take?
We go anywhere from an hour to 90 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm going to reach out to a couple people and make sure they've got the link. And so I'm not going far. I'll be right back.
And what does unverified mean for people under their name?
It's just a quirk of the latest WebEx update. So we believe that you are verified as being you.
Okay.
They are here. I don't know why, oops. We haven't figured out how to get rid of that.
I don't mind being unverified.
We all have an air of mystery now.
Hi. Did I miss something? It's only 6:29.
No, I know, Nina. I just do that. I just reach
Okay.
out as we approach the hour just to make sure
Yeah.
everybody is, sorry, I'm a nudge.
That's okay. I'm just making dinner and kind of trying to pull things together because I sort of fall in the door like literally when this is starting. And
So what are you making for dinner?
I have a Beyond Beef. I think they call them sliders, but I find them perfectly adequate for one person. And I'm gluten intolerant, so I have a gluten-free bun. But I will be honest with you, my start for the day is a Carvel Reese's peanut butter sauce sundae because it's my birthday.
Oh, happy
Happy
birthday.
Nina.
Happy birthday, Dina.
Happy
Thanks for
birthday.
spending it with us. I will say, I see Nina very early in the morning while she's on her bike riding from central Brooklyn. And then she passes me right at the edge of Brooklyn before she crosses the bridge to continue on her bike into Manhattan to usually go into Bellevue, Nina.
Well, was going to Bellevue. Now, actually, I've been doing some clinicals for a student who broke her leg in the middle of the semester. And so she could go to class on crutches, but not to the hospital. So I'm going to Queens Hospital Center, and I have talked to multiple people from that area and from Jamaica Hospital, and their response has been, there's no good way to get here by bicycle. So I either drive or take to Queens Hospital Center. I drive because it is really crazy getting there once you leave the train station. But to Jamaica Hospital, sometimes I drive, sometimes I take the train.
Well, I saw you on your bike very early in the morning one day
Yes.
last week when it wasn't quite as cold as it is this week, but it was cold. So my hat is off to you.
Oh.
And co-chairs, it is now beyond the 6:30 hour. If you ready, I'm going to begin recording and I'll let you kick it off. How's that?
Sounds good.
Yvette, do you want to do the first introduction and I'll do the second?
Sure.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Committee Board 14, Human Services Committee. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we'll have our first presentation is on Street Homeless Advocacy Project presented by Norman Seigel. So Norman, we're very happy to have you here with us and to share your knowledge and the work that you're doing around street homelessness.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I also want for the record to say that Sean Campbell is terrific. She's been not only professional, but very upbeat and helpful in arranging this evening. And I look forward to the presentation. I have with me one of our terrific volunteers, Sherry Leon, and we have a intern from Edgar Evers College, Madeline Enlow, who is en route from her job to home and sent me an email about 2 minutes ago saying she'll join us as soon as she gets home and puts her computer on. So this is especially important. I'm a graduate of the public school system, went to New Utrecht High School in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn College, many, many years ago. So a lot of the area that you cover under CB14, I'm very familiar with that area. I grew up in Borough Park, which is not too far from Kensington. And so the idea that you are interested is important because the Street Homeless Advocacy Project is now in its 30th month. We began in August of 2022, and last year, our second year, we had 65 volunteers. They range anywhere from someone who's 17 to someone who's 81, and all different kinds of people, a few former homeless people. The premise of the Street Homeless Advocacy Project is that no one, no one should have to live out on the streets, and that our experience is that when you begin to talk with people who are street homeless and you show them some respect and dignity, they begin to open up. Sometimes it takes more than just one interaction. Sometimes it takes a few before they'll open up. And when they open up, you find out that they have a lot in common with what we're trying to do, which is to get them to voluntarily leave the streets. And where do they go? That's part of the systemic problem, because there aren't enough single or double rooms for people. The congregate shelter that we began 40 some odd years ago has not been very successful, other than getting people out of the cold, out of being on the street or in public parks or on subways. But the story about the congregate shelters is repeated over and over to us from people who are out on the streets and in the parks. And that is that it is not a safe place. And even if it was relatively safe, it's not a place for people to heal, to get back on their feet. And so very often, also because of some of the safety concerns, where people are attacked, a lot of their possessions, including their documents, birth certificates, social security cards, they're stolen or misplaced or lost, whatever, which makes it even more difficult for people to kind of get their life together. So SHAP, Street Homeless Advocacy Project, we decided that what we were going to do is get volunteers. We're an unincorporated association, even though some people, including public officials, said, would you like some public funding? We said no, because we think that two things. One, all the bureaucracy and reporting requirements, we don't want to do that. And second, in addition to that point, you get people who have called and said, I'm interested. How much do you pay per hour? This is not a job for a lot of us. I say that a lot of the people who come to SHAP, it's like a calling. I've worked with a lot of different groups over the 55 years that I've been a civil rights lawyer. And this group of volunteers, no one's ever pure, but this group comes pretty close to it. There's no ego problems. Everybody gets along. The goal is a very humanistic goal, of trying to find out who is street homeless. Where do they come from? Moreover, do they have dreams? They have aspirations anymore, or have they given up? And if that's the case, can we give them some confidence so that they begin to dream about things that they would like to have in their life? The overwhelming amount of people that are out on the street are people of color. So there's enormous racial overtones to this. I've written and spoke for more than 4 decades, and I really believe this. If the people who are out on the street overwhelmingly like me, white men, this issue would have been dealt with very differently. So most of the people that are out there, they're black and brown, disproportionately black. There's some women, but they're overwhelmingly 80–85% easily are men. People are surprised. They think it's young men. There are a lot of young men out there, but there's also a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s even. And sometimes when we talk to some of these people, some people are out there, we're shocked, where I say you've been out a year or two and they'll say, no, I've been out here for 10 years. Now, again, we don't know whether we can believe everything that people tell us. I know for sure that I've experienced that non-homeless people don't always tell you the truth. So why should homeless people necessarily be so different? But on a personal level, on Thursday nights when I do the outreach, which is the Staten Island, Manhattan side, no matter what my day was like, I feel really experiencing a very human interaction with people, very different from me, listening to them. I learned to be more patient. I less judgmental, and I just want to hear what they have to say. And it's surprising when I tell people it's not hard. When we approach someone, I'll go over to them and say, "Hi, my name is Norman. Do you want to talk to me?" And most of the people say yes. And I say, "What's your name?" Try to make it more human, more personal. And then they very often ask, one, do you work for the city? And we say no. That gets us a few points. Then the next question usually is, are you getting paid to do this? And we say no. We get about 100 points on that one. And then usually they say, so why are you doing this? Which is a softball question for us to kind of do the pitch. I'm a New Yorker. You're a New Yorker. I care about you. When I tell them I'm a civil rights lawyer, it's like the Christmas tree lit up. And very often they start telling me, oh, I have legal problems. Can you help me with the legal problems? That's not what we're trying to do. And we explain that to them. Sometimes I do ask, tell me what it's about, and give them a referral. And once in a while, I even help someone legally. But that's not what we're there for. We're there to then say to the people, if you want, we can try to get you a place to stay. And then they get interested usually. And we say affirmatively, we're not here to put you in a congregate shelter. We're trying to see if there's a single room or a double room for you. Are you interested in that? And very often they say yes. Ones that say no, I'm okay. Or every once in a while, people say, leave me alone. And we leave them alone. We're not there to try to coerce them, not there to try to even do a heavy manipulation for them. They pick it up very quickly. A lot of them are survivors. They're street experienced. So they make a quick judgment about whether or not they can trust us enough to begin to talk about who they are and whatever. And sometimes those experiences in hearing these people is really moving. I mean, I think of one where there was a guy who said that he grew up like 4 blocks from where I grew up, 45th and 10th in Borough Park initially. He was about 4 blocks from me. But he was 20 years younger than me at that point. And as we talked, I found out he was a police officer for almost 20 years, came upon hard times and was out on the street. He had 2 sons, one in the Army, one in the fire department in the city of New York. At one point, when I said to him, so do you want me to get in touch with them? No, do not do that. I said, why not? And this was really moving. I'll never forget. He said, because I don't want them to know that their father's a failure. So it then took me about 30 minutes to kind of boost up his confidence that he wasn't a failure and that if he was a cop for that many years, he did really good stuff. He helped people. And one of the deals I made with him is that if we got him a place, and we did get him a place in the Bronx, a single room, I said, so the deal is, because then he said to me, well, I need a retainer with you, right? How much do I have to pay you? I said, no. The deal here is you get back on your feet, you come out with us in the future, and you'll be even more effective. I gave him my card, But in a lot of those situations, you don't hear from those people anymore because to some extent, they're kind of embarrassed, ashamed of where they're at. Example, he didn't want me to reach out to his sons. So what we do is we have teams. We try to get at least a half a dozen people to create a team. And the reasoning there is that volunteers and volunteerism, you can't expect someone to come every Thursday night or every Tuesday afternoon or whatever where the teams are doing things. So as long as we have 2 or 3 people each week, we can do it. We love, and very often we do have all 6 people, but sometimes it's 2 to 3 because with volunteers, you can't expect everybody to come every week. We ask people for at least 2 hours once a week and to be part of a team. In the probably, let's see, 52, 104, and about 120 weeks that we've been doing it, I too have missed a half a dozen. And so that's part of volunteerism. Our teams are, as I said before, one in the Staten Island, Ferry, Manhattan side. Then we have, with Sherry, one of the leaders in Washington Square Park. We have a team in front of a church on 31st Street in Manhattan. We have a team in Harlem. We have a team on the east side of Manhattan. We have a team at this point pretty much focused in the Barclay Center area in Brooklyn. We started that this year. But what we really want to do is we want to be citywide, and we're not yet. So that's one of the reasons I'm excited about working with CB14. And again, what would that mean? That would mean ideally, if CB14 is interested, can we get people from the board or people that you know would want to come to a training? Trainings usually take about 90 minutes. And we then explain to people what our philosophy is. I'll get back to that in a second. What we actually do, what our results are. Our results so far is in the 30 months, we've interacted with a little more than 1,300 people. I think it's 1,320 people. Now, for us, an interaction is not just 2 or 3 minutes saying to someone, "Hi, I'm Norman. Do you need some help?" No, we don't do that. We consider an interaction to be meaningful that A, we get to know the name of the person, a little about who they are, why they're there. That usually takes at least 10 minutes. Second, if we come back the next week and the person's still there, we have a second conversation with the person, it's still only one interaction. It's not a second interaction. The people who get paid to do this, from my understanding, if they come back for a second or third time and spend 3 or 4 minutes with the person, they count that as an interaction. And they do it because what they've said is they need to show their funders that they're really working hard numerically. We don't care about that. We care about the goal, which is how do you win the trust of people out there? I'm a gringo. And why should someone, a guy who's 50 years old, African American or Latino, why should he all of a sudden, he doesn't know me, why all of a sudden should he open up and want to start trusting me? It takes some time. I tell one thing, it was a guy named Charlie down at Staten Island Ferry. It took me a dozen times, I really mean it, a dozen times, but finally one night he said to me, "I want to come in." I was like shocked because I kept telling everyone, "There's no way this guy's ever going to come in." And he said to me when we put him on the bus, and I went with him because I was afraid that he wasn't even going to get to the location. He said something. He said, "Mr. Siegel, I trust you." And that was the key. And I haven't heard from him in about a month and a half, which means we got him a single room on the Bowery, and most likely you get the calls back when there's a problem. And since I haven't heard from him, I think that we succeeded on that. But it took a dozen times, and he became sort of a friend. I would go there, and I'd always go over, Charlie, how you doing, all that kind of stuff. I always knew that he was okay because the birds and even the squirrels near the park, near the Staten Island Ferry, whenever I would see him in the nice weather, the birds were on his hands and his shoulders, and even the squirrels, he would feed them. I figured if the birds were trusting him, so could we. And that's just one anecdote again. So of the 1,300 interactions, as of last week, 571 people we've been able to have voluntarily leave the streets, the parks, for better options. Now, there's also a little footnote to that one too, which we call the revolving door. For example, last week when I went to Staten Island Ferry with two other volunteers, there were two women, one African American, one white, and we had placed them 2 weeks previously, but they were right back. And the problem was that where they were, they had difficulty either with the person who was in the same room with one of them, or in the other situation, the woman went to a place which was okay, but then they transferred to a place that wasn't okay because she needed certain medication, she had certain medical problems, and the second place that she was transferred to wasn't cooperating in getting her a medication. So she decided, both women independently decided to come back to the same place that they were. So what did we do? We spent over an hour with both of them, and we were able to get them, with the help of the Department of Homeless Services, to go back to various places and to try to ameliorate the problem. I gave both of them my name and phone number, which was part of the reason why they were willing to go back, because I said, if there's a problem, you call me tomorrow or the next day, and I'll intervene. I haven't heard from them. On the other hand, I don't want to jinx it. It wouldn't be shocking if I go tomorrow night and one or both of them are back at the Staten Island Ferry Terminal again. So part of the problem is the system itself doesn't have adequate options for the people. And finally, and then I'd like Sherry to give a little presentation on what happens in Washington Square Park. And the problem is that we don't have enough viable options. And the options are not just housing. There's plenty of the people, take the two women that I was talking about last week. Even if someone called me today and said, I got a single room for the person, and he's a landlord, and he really heard about what we were doing, they're not capable yet to living independently. And so it's not just housing, it's people who have mental health problems, but they're not a danger to themselves or others. They talk to themselves. They're in their own little bubble. There's also people who have addiction problems. And then a lot of the people who have addiction problems have mental health problems as well. So you've got that complication. There's probably about 10% of the people, in our estimate, that all they need is a job or job training. And there's not very many programs for that either. And the mental health programs, if we go back to when deinstitutionalization occurred, starting in the late 60s and the 70s, where people were released. If you ever saw the film or read the book by Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you understood what was happening in these large asylums. So they deinstitutionalized people. A lot of people wound up living in what was known as single room occupancies, the SROs. at least in Manhattan, in the 80s, we lost about 100,000 SRO units. So where did those people go? They went to the congregate shelters. Then, because of the problems that I alluded to before, they wound up out on the streets. And so that was the beginning of the large street homeless population. We probably have now somewhere about 4,500 people out on the streets on any given night, especially on nights like tonight. It is very threatening for them. And so this is a problem that's not new. It's been going on for more than 4 decades. I believe that both the state has, the governors, every one of them during that period, has ignored their state constitutional obligation to provide for the care for the needy under Article 17, Section 1 of the state constitution, and under the Callahan decision, 1979, which provided an affirmative obligation for the state to provide for the right to shelter. Now, to New York City's credit, at that point, Ed Koch was the mayor, and he took on that responsibility. And the city has taken on that obligation by itself. This should be a statewide obligation, and there should be places all around the state, not just in New York City, where there's a right to shelter. And it's a fight that we've been trying to make, because SHAP is an advocate for the people out on the street, but then we become advocates to the system. We meet every 2 or 3 weeks with deputy mayors, commissioners from the mayor's team, and we make recommendations. We give them insights about what's going out on the street. They don't necessarily use us effectively. For example, we always tell them when they're going into a neighborhood and they're going to build a safe haven or even a shelter, that invite us, use us in the presentation, because then people will understand that it's not just the government people removed from the neighborhoods, but people like us who come from those neighborhoods and who have this experience and can tell the stories about what we're doing and the kind of results. Our results are generally 4 out of every 10 people that we interact with, they voluntarily leave the streets. For the people who get paid to do this on a full-time basis, it's less than 1 out of 10. So the model of having the same people going to the same location on the same day and the same time, it shows the continuity. I'll try to conclude in the following. Very often when I started this, and we would tell people, we'll be back next Thursday at 7 o'clock. And then we come back and they say, you came back? And I say, well, that's what we told you. And they say, that's what everyone tells us, but they don't come back. So that made us understand that the model should be the same people going to the same location at the same day and the same time to keep that kind of continuity and consistency. And that's how you begin to gain the trust, and then people kind to open up, and then you have a chance of getting them off the streets. On the other hand, the last thing is we have to continue to push, and we were glad to see that the mayor recently talked about 900 more units of single rooms, the idea of creating some safe havens for people who have mental health problems but aren't a danger to themselves or others, that they should be locked up and incarcerated, in effect, in psychiatric hospitals, because that never worked, and it still doesn't work because there's no guarantee that they're really treating people. They're really just taking them off the streets and out of sight, out of mind. So with CB14 and under the leadership of Sean Campbell and this committee, the hope would be that we can make a presentation, a much shorter presentation that I'm doing right now, with CB14, and that CB14 with some of the people that are on the board, but some of the people who are not on the board, would be willing to set up a team or two in that area. We'll train you. The first few weeks, we put one of our senior people, sort of a team leader, to be there to show how it actually we approach this issue. And then from that, find leadership within the groups to then continue that. And on a weekly basis with 2-hour commitment, begin to do what we're doing. And it's a win for the community. It's a win for the unhoused people. And finally, it's a win for the volunteers. I always say my goal is every Thursday night to at least get one person off the streets. And sometimes we had one night where we actually had 4 people. I didn't need to take the train home. I could have flown home. I was so upbeat about feeling, how do I put it? I can go to court and win a case, and it's an abstract win, a piece of paper. Sometimes we have to fight to enforce that court order. But in this situation, if I get the person to leave the terminal, to get on the van that we have out there, and they go to a single room, it's like I could touch it. It's real. I've made a difference. I feel wonderful, validated, whatever term you want to use. So that's our hope. And hopefully, we did this once with a community board in Manhattan. They were very excited. There was no follow-up. And so it would be ideal if we could show that a community board actually took this on and after a few months was making a difference. Because if we could get even a third of all the community boards to do this, we can make a huge difference on street homelessness. And I think it would also help to convince people that community boards do more than grant, permits for outdoor cafes and things of that sort. Don't get me wrong. My wife is on a community board 7 in Manhattan. I think they do terrific work. I'm shocked to find out she's on there for a few months now, how much work it is and how much time with the committees and the board meetings. I don't think people realize that community boards have that kind of commitment. So I thank you all. Let me turn it over to Sherry, who can give you some specifics about what they did in Washington Square Park. Sherry?
Thank you. I don't have much to say, but I did want to start with I noticed that in the chat you posted about the DHS claiming that it takes 300 interactions on average before an unhoused person accepts services, and I can't even imagine why the city would want to present that. Maybe it justifies a very low, not to disrespect the city and the agencies that work doing homeless outreach, because we work with them closely. But my experience and our team's experience in Washington Square Park is nothing like that. It does not take us 300 interactions to get someone to accept services. And in this case, our services are very specifically about asking someone if they want to go to a safe haven or a stabilization bed. I can't give you an average, but I would say that in Washington Square Park, which is a fairly unique community because people congregate around a certain geographic area, so we're not roaming the streets like some of the other teams are. People come to us after having spent a few months there talking to people and getting sort of the word of mouth out about who we are and what we're doing and how we approach, offering what we have to offer to people. They began to trust us. They began to refer each other to us. So what typically happens, we'll go out there and start to talk to people, and other people will come around and ask us if we can call to see if they can get a bed at a safe haven or stabilization site. So it not only does it not take us 300 interactions, but I would say that the common misperception is that people refuse to go inside. you know. And I really think that that's just a consequence of, you know, people who interact with them not spending enough time with them and not really approaching them with anything other than sort of a flyby. You got to get off the street. You got to get off this park bench. Can you go in? You know, and I think that that what SHAP does is it, you know, it allows us as volunteers to just sort of, as Norman said, interact with people in a less transactional way. So even though we are very specifically wanting to put people inside, it's not necessary that every time we talk to someone, we do that. It could be that we come back another time. This has happened a lot. Norman said he's talked to someone for 12 times. I myself have also had that experience where it's taken a while, but I'd say the vast majority of people that I have spoken to and that our team has spoken to do eventually want to go to a safe haven bed, especially when they hear that it's a lower barrier type of facility than a shelter. You don't get kicked out during the day. You check in every few days. As long as you do that, they'll save the bed for you. Some people interpret that phrase "low barrier" as being like the safe havens let in people that a shelter wouldn't let in. It's not really the case. The same kind of like protections for both the people inside and the people in the neighborhood surrounding safe havens and stabilization sites are there in terms of like not allowing certain, you know, contraband inside, you know, not allowing on-site drug use. As the Human Services Committee meeting, I assume that if you've ever reviewed a proposal for placing a safe haven in your district, you know, you probably know that Breaking Ground has similar rules for safe havens as they would for any other shelter they're proposing. And I guess the only other thing I would say is that I noticed, and I did look at your expense, you know, your district needs statement for this year, and and I noticed that fairly high up on that list is asking for an expanded, you know, street homeless outreach resources for your district. And I think that this is a good complement to, you know, getting those resources from the city. And it really doesn't require very much commitment to see a very tangible result. And I think that what, you know, the work that my team, which is 4 or 5 people in Washington Square Park, has done over the past few months, we've interacted over the past 5 months. I counted our interactions as being with 113 individuals. And we've placed 33 people in safe havens in that same period of time, which I think compared to, you know, some of the other things I read in the media about how DHS operates is gives us, and SHAP in general, the statistics are the same for SHAP, gives us bragging rights in a certain way. So I guess that's the only other thing that I'd just like to say is that you really can make an impact. Individuals can make a very tangible and positive impact on this issue, even though we can't solve the problem, which is very complex. We can see people move off the street in your neighborhoods just by approaching them as neighbors, engaging with them, offering them the opportunity to go to a place that is safer than a safe haven and offers them the potential to transition into a more permanent housing, you know, kind of setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there people with questions or comments?
Is there anybody else from with the group here?
Yeah,
Madeline.
Madeline, are you on?
Yes.
Yeah,
Madeline's
I'm here.
there. I
Hi,
thought so.
I'm Madeline. Hi, I
Introduce
volunteer.
yourself.
What? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. My name is Madeline, and I volunteer with the Staten Island Ferry Terminal team on Thursdays. And I'm also a Medgar Evers CUNY student, and I'm doing an internship with SHAP and other social justice projects. So a little bit of research projects that I'm working on, and also potentially doing a survey of some of the facilities that we are helping people get placed in to see how they feel about the services being given to them.
That's awesome, Madeline.
Nice to meet
So
you.
you're in school not too far away from, just outside of our district and not too far away from the office. So hope we can follow up and continue the conversation. Co-chairs,
Yeah.
I don't see hands up. I have questions and would be happy to get the questions started if you'll indulge me.
Sure,
Go ahead.
take it
One
away.
of the, one of the questions I have in terms of your process is how you're able to find rooms or beds so that the people you're interacting with can go directly. We're often told that everybody has to go to central intake, and it sounds like you're not having to direct your clients or new friends, new acquaintances through to that process.
Right. The 30th Street Intake Center is a horrible experience. A lot of people, they just won't go there. They've been there. And so from earlier on, we explained to the people, we meet periodically with the deputy mayor and with the commissioners from DHS, DSS, Department of Social Services, and we told them over and over again that if you want us to succeed, we're not going to send people to the 30th Street because they won't go there. So, for example, there's a place in Brooklyn, 36th Street and Fort Hamilton Parkway, about 6 blocks from PS 131, where I went to school as a kid. So it's a good neighborhood. It's a former hotel, Days Inn. The staff is terrific. And the facility is terrific in the sense that it's single and double rooms. I was allowed to, with no one watching me, talk to the people that were there. Everyone that I talked to, about 6 or 7 people the day that I was there, they really liked it. The big issue was, can I stay here forever? Because, and it was supposed to be just a temporary place, but we have a good working relationship with the Brooklyn Welcome Center. There's now a Bronx Welcome Center that I've been out to too, and they have a 76 units, which would be single or double, and it's on Webster Avenue in the Bronx. And so we're going to develop a good relationship with them. So very often when we find someone out on the street, we then, when we call the Department of Homeless Services and say we find someone who wants to now leave the street, I will say to them, could you check with the Brooklyn Welcome Center so that we can send them there, especially with Staten Island Ferry. It's not too far. We have a van that's always there at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, so that if we get people, we can put them right on the van. And that Brooklyn Welcome Center is, and Welcome Centers is a good concept that we're trying to get the city to have one in every borough, because they, in effect, do the intake, and they're not like the 30th Street, and they can have people there anywhere from up to 30 days without, even though you're on record. We waived one guy, he was there for a few months because he didn't want to leave. He was anxious about going places. Finally, we got him to agree to go. And there's sometimes when they want to transfer somebody and the person doesn't want to go to another part of the city because they've got their own program that they have to go to if they're on, mental health programs or drug treatment programs, and they're in Brooklyn and they're at the Brooklyn Welcome Center. We can intervene and get everyone to put a pause on that person's transfer until something will come up that's later on. So we've worked hard with the people from the Department of Homeless Services. My sense is they kind of like us because they are respectful of our commitment, our energy, and sometimes if they're not doing what they should be doing, I give them hell. So it's a combination of, they know that we're serious and we're out there now for 30 months. And so we're able to get placements, and the placements are all, when we call in, there's a thing called the Joint Command Center of the Department of Homeless Services. And some of those people actually, at one point, were doing outreach themselves on the streets and then get transferred to answering the phones And I think they understand how committed we are, and they respond affirmatively. So we don't have to send people to 30th Street. And sometimes when they tell us certain things and we object to it, we then can go to the meeting that we have with their bosses and make a complaint. And that seems to work sometimes too, so that we have less. So we've learned how to use the system, which is what I'm saying. And so maybe that's part of our success, but it should be across the board, because it shouldn't be as rigid bureaucratically as it is. Because if you look at the issue, you're dealing with human beings, and if you want to get them off the street, my feeling is get them off the street, and then in a nicer setting other than 30th Street, then you can ask all the questions you want.
Mhm.
And that's the way to win them over. And the goal, again, is not to just put them in a temporary welcome center, but the goal is that's the first step towards a process to get them into permanent housing or a job and housing.
And then just to follow up to that, just so that I'm clear on your answer. So the relationship that you have is still with the city, with the department. You don't, from what I'm hearing, have any direct relationship with the providers. We have a Black Vets for Social Justice shelter, a Children's Rescue Fund shelter, and then Breaking Ground has our one and only, I think, only a 50-bed safe haven.
Yeah, we only can place people through the Department of Homeless Services.
Okay, thanks.
And although as time goes on, we're more and more independent ourselves, we always put out in our reports, and even when we're doing any interviews for the media, it's a joint project with the Adams administration. Although these days that connection isn't as positive as it used to be. But in the context of that, we recognize that it's a joint program.
Thank you.
We couldn't have been as successful without the help of the Department of Homeless Services and the Deputy Mayor, Ann Williams Isom, who coordinates those meetings where we talk about systemic issues. But on that stuff, we don't have as good a recommendation on systemic changes. Example, how did we get around that? They have this silly rule that if someone's coming off the street, they can only have 2 bags or 2 whatever before they go in. So some of the teams then realized, okay, we made the recommendation, change that system. It's arbitrary. If you want them off the street, so if they had 3 bags, what's the problem? So one of the teams found a woman, I think it was in Union Square, and she had 4 small bags, and they wouldn't take her in. So what did they do? They went over to the bodega, and they got the huge bags. So they made 4 bags into 2 bags, and then they took her. So, or there's rules in certain places where you can't bring in food. Well, there are people around our street who take medication. I take medication, and I have to take some of my medication only after I eat. So if someone wants to take their medication between one of the meals, how do they do it unless they have some food? So we've not succeeded on that one. And so what happens? Some of the people leave the facility, sometimes even a shelter, because they say to us, they won't let me bring food in and I can't take my medication. So how can I stay there? So we continue to struggle on the second part of the advocacy, which is to change the system. One of our big things we advocated in the beginning of our experience, we found out that there were a lot of vacant hotels and motels throughout the city. And so we came up with a suggestion and did a 25-page report on eminent domain, how the state could take over the property and then they could transfer it to the city and the city could transfer it to a not-for-profit. And we suggested that you do 2 of those hotels and do a 1-year pilot. And they just dismissed it out of hand. It would have been a huge saver, because when you look at the amount of money that's being put into the rental of hotel rooms for people that are homeless, or even the migrant population, which is a whole nother issue there, they're spending millions, billions of dollars. And if you invested it in a long-term purchasing some of those hotels, in 6, 7 years, you would then not have to pay the amount of money that they've been paying, not just in the last 3 years, but even from Ed Koch's period in the 80s. They were doing at the famous Martinique Hotel in Manhattan on 31st Street. That became a huge thing in the Old Village Voice. They would write every week about how much money was being spent. Why are we paying all these owners? And then when you take a look at some of the owners, who knows their connections to the government to begin with? So when you're talking about the budget being $3.5 billion for this, there's something out of whack here.
Can I just jump in?
Of
Yes, go
course.
ahead, Nina.
Okay, so actually in Columbia Magazine, there was a whole article talking about the issue of trying to get people homed, and a lot of the same things that you brought up. They brought up, and one of the big things that did come up was the disjointedness of services. And I think so, you know, I've done a certain amount of work as in my role as a nurse practitioner at I was at a place King something, I don't know, out in the Bronx, and then I was at the place on is it Randall's Island. A lot of the people in that facility are transitioning out of substance abuse programs, so it's a little bit different. But one of the things that sort of, you know, a couple of things came up was that oftentimes the fact that people can't get the services that they need because there are so many barriers, like to getting mental health services and so forth, that these things pile up, and eventually they wind up in situations where they wind up losing, you know, losing their jobs, losing, you know, the ability to pay for a place to stay, and then they wind up on the street. But then when they, you know, in getting, you know, housed, they still need all of those other services, and they need to not you know, have so many difficulties in obtaining the services that they need, whether it's you know, medical care, mental health services, and so forth. And one thing I see a lot of in New York, which just is crazy, because I occasionally have patients in this situation, is this sort of treating people like they're just pawns. Like you can just say, okay, so you got all settled in Brooklyn, boom, we're gonna shuffle you off to the Bronx, and now they've either got to get on a subway and come to Brooklyn to get the medical care that they've established, or reestablish care, and so forth, and it's just a mess. But one of the things they did in Denver, I mean, we don't really have a way to do this in you know, in New York City so much, just because we don't have the land, but they actually made tiny houses. And they focused in Denver, they focused primarily on veterans, because they were kind of the easiest group, I guess, to identify and start moving along, and getting, you know, housed in these little tiny houses. They've also, you know, the article just talked about some, you know, other things. And I think the thing that you said about, you know, creating these, you know, single occupancy, you know, little apartments and stuff, but making sure that there are services that are right there, that there's social workers, that there's, you know, say a nurse who can help with medication. You know, I don't think that they need a full-time doctor, but the social workers and psychologists and so forth. You know, it just needs to be organized, you know, in a more cohesive fashion, instead of, you know, such a piecemeal kind of a situation.
Well, I think you're right, Nina. And one of our long-term goals is that if we had enough teams citywide and people all came together with the systemic issues of how to change the current system, it could make an impact. Uh, we have now a half a dozen teams. On any given Thursday night, we have at least 25, maybe 30 people out there. And again, because not everyone comes every Thursday or whenever they're doing it. But if you had it more expanded, uh, it would change how the system functions, because the system is a mess. And for new volunteers, I have to try to explain to them that you're now dealing with a flawed system, but we have to do the best we can within that flawed system. And someday maybe we can change the flawed system to improve it. And if we had more people, so it's not just Manhattan based, uh, I think it would make a huge difference. And I always believe, I always love juries rather than judges, because I think that people in general, if they sense that there's a serious effort by people who really care and know what they're doing, that becomes contagious. And people are looking for opportunities to use their skills. And just hearing what you said, Nina, you got it. You understand it. It's a human dynamic, and you got to deal with people as human beings. If you don't deal with them as human beings, how do you expect them ever to respond affirmatively?
Thank you.
Oh, can I add something,
Sure.
Norman? Yeah. The only thing I was going to say is that it strikes me that in addition to what Norman said about, community boards, is that getting in community boards involved in this effort, in this conversation, because you're at the nexus of both receiving from members of the community in the district complaints probably about when there's situations that need to be addressed, like your involvement, whatever extent that might be, also would give you some insights into into what you could advocate for, more effectively, probably just knowing what the bureaucracy is, what the issues are in terms of transitioning people that are out there to a better place. I think it's a really good endeavor if you're able to participate.
And Yvette, I'm not sure if you were calling people, Hatem has had a hand up.
Yes, go ahead,
Yeah,
Tom.
please, if you allow me. Mr. Siegel, thank you for the great work you are doing. Once you manage to persuade someone to get off the street in a dignified manner as you do, what is the next step? Is there any rehabilitation programs to help whoever willing to be in their own again to be back into the society in a dignified manner, or just you providing housing and that's it?
No, it's not just housing. As I said before, we have a lot of people on the street who have mental health problems, meaning, again, they're not a danger to themselves or others, but they got mental health problems and they need oral therapy. What do middle class people do and upper class people do? They go once a week to a psychiatrist and they talk through their demons or whatever. Uh, Same thing for poor people, low income people, homeless people. They need that kind of stuff. They don't all have to be shot up with Haldol. That's not good. And the medication sometimes is not necessarily good because it has adverse effects on their health, etc. And what we're trying to do, and Madeline's going to try to do it, and it has to be done very sensitively, is we're now, after all the stuff that we've done where we got people off the streets, we want to know what happens now to them when we place them and they don't call us. Well, some of them do call us. There's a woman named Kiki Vandaway from Brooklyn. She's unbelievable. I keep telling her, you don't have to do that. Like the other night, she called me, a homeless guy. He had terrible shoes. It's cold. She bought him some boots. Then she bought him some socks because the boots were a little too big. So she got him these two heavy pairs of socks, all out of her own. and he's now, today she called me and said, he's in this place now, single room. He's so happy. And even though it's cold, he's warm. I mean, it was really inviting, but we have to do it now, not just anecdotally. So Madeline's going to try to come up. She's got a questionnaire of about 11 questions. If they allow her to go into the places and begin to ask people to fill out these surveys so we can find out what's actually happening at the places. Are they providing the services for people to get back on their feet? And if they're not providing it, that will be part of our advocacy now to try to take that issue on. If the mayor's office's people won't do it, then do we go to the city council? Do we go public on it? We'd rather do it cooperatively. So the answer to your question, which is a good question, we're now at the point where we know that we get people off the streets in a good percentage, but what happens to them? And sometimes when I ask the city to tell me where they are now, it's amazing. They tell us they don't know where these people are. How can you not know where they are? We gave you the information. You sent them to X location. Don't you know where they are? And sometimes they tell me, well, they checked out and they didn't check out. So we tell people now, if you're going to leave, check out, like at a hotel, check out so that people know that you left on a certain day. So it's part of the failed system. And that's why this thing has not really, in my opinion, ever really fundamentally changed. Have we made incremental change? Yeah. Are there more single rooms out there now? Yeah. Are there more programs out there? Yes. But not enough. Not enough. Remember, you got tonight, there'll be over 4,000 people out on the street.
Thank you. Florencia, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, Mr. Siegel, have you ever seen like mothers and their children out there? I know my family and I, my kids and I, we usually, well, while they were in school all the way through college, we'd go out and feed, bring food, sometimes, usually once per week or, twice per month, depending, on their availability. And in 2022 was the first time we ever came across a mother and her child. And like she seemed to have gotten out of an abusive situation, but she was out on the streets. That was the first time I ever came across. I just wanted to know if you've ever encountered parents with their children. I know we've had people and their dogs or cats or
Right.
couples, but that was the first time we ever encountered a mother and a child. And the child was young, by the way.
Florencia, no, I'll speak to Staten Island and maybe Sherry took, but as far as I know, we have not seen anyone at the Staten Island ferry terminal and in the park surrounding it where there's been a family. They're all singles, adults. And I'm just thinking of all the reports that I've gotten. I don't think we've seen
Sorry.
families out there. Sherry, has the
That
same
was
thing in
in
Washington Park.
Manhattan. That was in Manhattan. Sorry.
Yeah, in
No,
Washington Square Park, same, right?
No, I haven't seen any children out there, and I guess I've met a lot of mothers out there whose children are not with them, and
Same here.
maybe made an assumption about that being the case because if they end up some of those people are having substance use issues, and so I think the story there has been that they've been separated from their children for whatever reason, and that's probably why they're not out there with them. Hopefully the kids are in a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. That mother, she obviously was fleeing an abusive situation because tried, she didn't want her child faced, there were just, and she kind of spoke and she spoke to us, but, it was, you could tell like she was more concerned about getting off the street soon for her kids, she was telling us. But yeah, but that was the first and only one that we've ever encountered in all the years.
You know, most of the people out on the street are singles. But Sherry's right. There are uh, women, but even men. They talk about their children, but they're not. You know that story I told you in the beginning. The guy would not let me get in touch with his two sons because he said that he didn't want them to know that their father was a failure. So you're dealing with those kinds. And lastly, we could use mental health experts. I'm not a mental health expert. I had one guy, after about 3 or 4 times, he came over one Thursday night. He said to me, Mr. Siegel, I'm hearing voices, and I know this is bad. Can I just talk to you this evening about my mental health situation? And I said to him, I'm just a lawyer. You know, I'm not qualified to be a psychiatrist for you. And then he said, well, can you get me someone? And, you know, we don't have that kind of stuff. Another thing, so many people out there, their teeth are in terrible shape. And even when they're young, there was one guy in his 20s, and people are surprised. In the 30 months that I've been doing this, only once did a homeless person ask me for money. It's just the myth that that's what they want. They want money for their drugs. Only once. But one guy, black guy, 29, I went to him and I said, do you need anything? He said, yeah. I said, what do you want? He said, you get me a toothbrush and toothpaste. Not a problem. I went into the ferry. He was out in the park. I went into the ferry. It cost me $6. I got a Colgate toothpaste and a toothbrush. I brought it back, and when you saw him, his teeth were horrible, and you start to think of it. These people are out there, they're not brushing their teeth, they're not doing anything. So I saw once in the NYU alumni that there was someone who was at the dental school, and he was talking about, oh, he wanted to work with homeless people. So I called him immediately. I thought it was a perfect, the guy never returned the call. I called him a second time, never returned a call. I thought it would be great if we had some dentists. I've also gone to some psychiatrists and asked them if they could get their colleagues and come out and work with us. That would make it such a difference, because then we could have people who know how to approach these issues rather than us. And it's never worked. We've gotten lawyers and social workers. You know, we have a couple of former nurses, but we're not mental health experts. And you just think about it. If people have been out on the street, I always think to myself, if I've been out on the street for more than a few weeks, I probably developed even more mental health problems than I have right now. So in the context of that, it's understandable that they need that kind of assistance. And so what do? We're moving more in the direction of involuntarily committing people. The mayor, the governor, they're all going to do that. I think it's all part of the out of sight, out of mind. Get them off the streets. But there's no thoughtful planning about, even if you get them off the streets, where are they going? It's your question before, sir. What's the follow-up? What kind of planning do we have? And what success rate do we have in getting people not just off the streets for a week or 3 weeks or whatever, but get them permanently off the streets and get them back independent living? But if we had more people involved in this, and go back to the community boards, if you can be the community board that gets involved, and then other community boards 6 months from now or a year from now, you know, we have a half a dozen of them, boy, it can make a huge difference.
Thank you. Sean, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I was just thinking about in terms of people who are, I mean, certainly being unsheltered for a period of time would reasonably lead to issues with depression and anxiety and that sort of thing. But I imagine there are a lot of people who are living unsheltered who have a diagnosis, and to the extent that somebody is willing to share that they have a diagnosis and it's documented, is there any pathway to go directly into supportive housing where they would have a more sort of stable, longer lasting placement?
Theoretically, the city told the New York Times that they have certain shelters where they have the mental health people, they have psychiatrists going there. But when we make inquiry on that, I don't know where that is. I think at a minimum it's an exaggeration. When we have people out there, I'll speak for myself, I recognize they have mental health problems. You know, some of them are delusional. And when I try to make inquiry of where we can send them on a volunteer basis, there's very few references. And then sometimes if you call those places in the evening, nobody's there. And then if you finally get someone, so the appointment could be 4 weeks from now. What you need is if you get somebody, we've had times where in the beginning, when we didn't have the van there, when we got there at 7 o'clock, we would get people that would say, okay, I'm ready to go. And then we'd have to wait like an hour before the van came. And the people then left. I even had one time where they put a woman on the bus, and the guy that she was with, who I thought he was probably abusing her, when we got there, he wasn't there at 7 o'clock, and she was there. So she was willing to get on the bus. And I told the bus guy, take her, go immediately, take her to the place. And he said, no, I can't go for one. I have to have at least two. He made it up. And what happened? In 10 minutes, the guy came. He saw she was on the bus, and he was yelling at her from the street, get off the bus, get off the bus. And what did she do? She got off the bus. That was her one opportunity in order to kind of make a break. And we blew it. So we yelled and screamed, and now we have the van there at 7 o'clock. But that's only in my location. The rest of the teams have the same problem. There's people, Sherry can tell you sometimes she's supposed to put 2 hours, she'll spend 4 or 5 hours. Why? Because she's got some people that are interested, but there's no way to get the transportation because the connection didn't work. How frustrating is that? You know, and but it goes back. The system is flawed. We got to do the best we can with that flawed system, but then try to change the flawed system incrementally to make it better. We need your help.
Yeah, I have a very personal and comprehensive insight into the process of getting someone supportive housing services. And if anyone's interested in hearing more details about that, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you, because it's painful to be witness to seeing someone who's already been diagnosed and who is cooperating, is motivated, wants to get in, and it's been 8 months. And apparently the only thing between this person signing a lease to get into the room that she is eligible for and which has been reserved for her is some sort of document or 2 documents, or you know, it changes every week. There's more stuff, but it's a bad
System.
inefficient system.
Yeah. Well, I agree that that a community board could be a really good springboard for an additional volunteer group. And I think this board is, you know, you like Yvette is very involved with her house of worship, and Florencia as well, and already spoke about some of the outreach she's done. And Florencia also works with the with a group of violence disruptors who respond after incidents of violence in the community, people on their neighborhood association, the community council, and all of that. So, and then, as you said, Sherry, the fulcrum that we are between community and the city services that are supposed to be serving the city, I think situates this community and through the board pretty well. So I don't know if, co-chairs, how you want to present this to the board or I think what we would have to talk about, if there is interest among the community board members upon your report to the board, it is just setting up the in-person meeting at the community board office for training and to pull in the people who would then be the actors in the volunteer group. And you call them teams? Or did I make that up? In the team, okay.
The one thing, Yvette, when you asked the presentation, if you go to our website, shapnyc.com, Sherry, that's correct, right?
Yeah, and it's in
Shap
the
NYC.
chat, Norman.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you
I
go
put in
there,
the chat.
we have our annual reports that are online. You can take a look at the second year report that was filed last August, and I think it's about 20 pages. If you're going to want to go anywhere further on this stuff, and people want to know more about us, that would be a good place to go. And the website has other stuff as well, shapnyc.com. So if you went there, you could find that kind of written material as well as some videos.
Jerry, I think it's really cool that you went and looked at our district needs statement. And I just sort of think about the fact that we're asking for more resources for a system that takes 300 plus interactions. And I think it'd be great to put some action behind that wish. So I hope we can follow up and put together.
I just want to say, let me interrupt. I didn't do what Sherry did. I can't believe that they put that out. 300 interactions to get a person to leave. That speaks
That was at a
volumes.
budget consultation with district managers, Brooklyn-wide district managers, and that was the deputy commissioner of DSS.
It's just the way I talk about that guy, Charlie, that I took 12 times, that's like to try to show the most extreme instance to show the patience it took. So the 12, no way. I mean, it first of all, 300, and no way. I'm sorry, I would use the word that I said before I wouldn't use, so I won't use it.
We'll mute you.
And Sean, thank you for also the other thing I noticed, and I think it's great, is that you actually solicited on your website people to participate in the whole project, in the annual count. So that's great that you put up something up on your website asking for volunteers for that.
Yeah, that's a board member request. So that's my board. Good people.
Well, any board people that I know, including my wife, CB7, she's on it now for about 4 months. They're incredible. They've had some meetings in our house. I saw the people. They do care. They do care. And, my experience, I love New York, is people care. Assuming they think that there is something that people are serious committed to, they want to be part of. And this is a model that could excite people. And again, the validation for all of us is very clear, because when you're helping people, there's nothing better than that. Well, I think of one or two other things that could be better, but I won't say that.
So one of the things that Norman wanted to do was go straight into the training, and then we talked about having this sort of introductory meeting first. So do you want to make a report to the board and then assuming that there's a positive response, then try to schedule an in-person follow-up?
Whatever you think.
Do you have another process in mind? We also have Ornella Parker on the call, Ornella's great at process. So any ideas on how you want to move forward? let's
No, we can do
figure
whatever.
it out or put it on hold to figure out as a board later.
Well, I think the thing to do probably is if the committee thinks that this is something you want to recommend to the full board, if you need us to come to the full board, we can do that. If you think you can just go and make the recommendation for the full board and see whether you have, we would like, if you had 15 or 20 people, we could then do a training. We do have, 90 minutes, Sherry? It's about 90 minutes. When we did the training, the last training we did up at the Columbia Teachers College, so we did it off a cell phone. It's not necessarily professionally, beautiful. But when we have people who call us, one or two people, they want to begin, and that's not enough to do 4 or 5 of us to come and do a 90-minute training. We send them the video, and they can watch it. And what we would do is we would repeat that, because in person it's better, because even on the Zoom stuff, I always think you feel the audience, you connect with the audience, and we would come and do a training, and then we would find out after the training how many people still want to be involved. And again, if we had at least a half a dozen people, that would be a team. So let's assume optimistically we had 12 or 13 people who wanted, we probably have 2 teams, and then figure out with you, Sean, and the committee, where are the best locations in your district. And in some places, like Staten Island Ferry, same thing with Washington Square Park, we're in a location where we know the people are always there. But then we've got some teams like the Upper East Side, Harlem, they walk the streets. And they begin to see different people. But the same thing what Sherry was saying, I've had anecdotal situations where I get one guy into a place at the Brooklyn Welcome Center, and then I get there the following Thursday, and a friend of his is waiting for me. And I say, how did you know? Well, my friend told me about you guys, and I want to come in also. Can you get me a place? And then there's a guy down at the Staten Island Ferry. He refers to me as the Rev. And I've told him over and over again, I'm not a minister, I'm just a lawyer. And he goes around telling people, these guys, they're good. If you are serious, talk to them. And then he sets up appointments for me, So you never know where it goes. And it's been quite a journey for all of us in feeling that we're trying to do something and that we feel really good about what we're doing, which is a benefit for all the people that are doing this.
One thing that I was thinking is, because these meetings are, they're recorded, right? Even the committee meetings. So we already have a great presentation from both Norm and Sherry that's available for people to see and to learn more. At the well, our next CB board isn't really that far away. When you think about, we're already at the end of January almost. I think that one option anyway, I'm just tossing this out, would be that we can present the fact that we had a speaker, for those who maybe didn't, tune in for this week, and that this is something that we would like to do. And please watch the YouTube meeting to learn more. And then we could have, I guess, a sign up for the training from there. That's just one idea anyway.
I like that idea, because that could make it happen even sooner. And then once you get, even a dozen people, will come and do the training. And then we can start, we can make it all happen by March. And it's probably good. It's hard to begin people in this cold, like tomorrow night. It's going to be really hard for our volunteers, uh, and uh, and there'll probably be less people out on the streets. Actually, the other thing I've come to realize, the people that are street homeless, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're survivors. They figure it out. Like that guy Charlie, I always say to him, "So what do you do, when it's really cold?" And he says, "I ride the A train. I know which train to take. I know exactly how long I can be on the train where before they hassle me." And he knew exactly, like from maybe 1 o'clock in the morning to 5, he could ride and sleep on the train. But then he's got to get out, so he'll take his naps in the afternoon. So I learned a lot about how, in their own world, they're survivors. And so if they're survivors, if we can just get them some more viable options, uh, they'll take them. Anyway, this has been, I like the response, even on Zoom. It's hard to feel it, but I feel it. I feel it good with your comments and your questions. So thank you very much. You can hear my voice. I'm more inspired now.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions that you have that you think, if in light of the fact that you might want other people to see this, is there anything that we haven't answered in terms of like just the process or what actually happens in volunteerism, or that Norman hasn't mentioned?
I'm just curious, do you give them sandwiches or food of any sort while you're out there, or you just engage in conversation?
An interesting debate, and the way I lead is we could have diversity. So we have one team at 31st Street in front of the church, where there's a lot of people coming there for the church programs on 31st between 6 and 7. We were able to set up and 3 of the 4 Thursday nights with food vendors who come and feed the people. And on the 4th night, the team itself brings a table and refreshments. There's some of us who then think that that's not the best thing, because you can make the argument that we're aiding and abetting the people with food, clothing, to let them stay out on the street. And then there's also a difference in our group, and so we recognize individual teams to decide how they want to do it. But there's an aspect of how much social work do you do? We had a volunteer who would give people money, would bring them clothes, food, and that's not my approach, but I didn't say no. There's a couple of volunteers, that woman Kiki that I talked about before, incredible. She'll give her heart away. She gives her phone number, her home phone number, to a lot of the people. I discourage that. Give them the Shack's number, or give them my number, but my cell phone number, not my home number, because you got to be careful with some of that stuff. Also, we've had some instances where I have young women, college students, getting really impressed with the guys that are out there. I have to be very careful about that too. And I have to, make sure that the relationship is a professional relationship and nothing more. So in response to your question, we have different views. We try to reach certain views, but as long as someone is trying, even the people, there's nothing illegal about or unethical about doing some of the things that I said before that some of the volunteers do, way beyond what our mission is about. But so therefore, on the answer to the question about food and all that, what I can do at the Staten Island Ferry, since there's a Wendy's there, there could be sometimes when I'm talking with people and we're waiting for the the van to take them. I'll say to them, if I see they tell me that they haven't eaten in the last day or so, I'll say, do you want to get a burger or something? And I can get the special for $6.24. And so I can do that. Or we had a woman who wanted popcorn. They charged us $8 for a popcorn. I gave that guy a hard time. But once I gave her the popcorn, man, that was easy. I'll get people some coffee if they need that, or say something while we're waiting for the van to come. Do you want a cup of coffee or something? But more than that, I don't think. We had a question recently about should we, since it's cold, should we get some blankets for people? And that was a touchy one. How do we handle that? Because that would be, in the way we resolved it, if it was a very limited thing, but not an ongoing thing. We're trying to raise money to buy blankets for people, because again, you can argue that that's assisting people to stay out on the street.
Our team in Washington Square Park is sort of a rolling pop-up thrift shop sometimes. Some of our members have, one of our members has a size 12 feet, so he brings his gently used sneakers and they usually disappear within a few minutes. I also have people in my apartment building who like to dump off their designer clothes, so on occasion I've taken those in and given away some really, really very nice jeans to people, but it's not a regular practice. So, you know, when some of our members have come across things that they think might be useful, they bring them along during our outreach.
When I've been teaching at Jamaica Hospital, I had noticed that there were a number of regulars that, you know, and generally when I came by, they all were sleeping because it's, you know, seven something in the morning. I mean, I just put together some shopping bags. And, you know, every time I go to the dentist or my kids go to the dentist, you know, to get our teeth cleaned, whatever, we come home with a toothbrush and, you know, and so forth. So I put all of those, I mean, they're brand new, you know, in these little nice little zipper things. Plus I'm on a subscription thing, and sometimes we just wind up with too much toothpaste arriving. So anyway, just put these together, and airline blankets. You know, every time somebody flew on a plane, they took the blanket home with them, and that's like, okay, how many flights? You know, we could stack our own stash. You know, supply our own flight with all the airline blankets we had. So I just put stuff together and food that didn't, you know, like, you know, non-perishable crackers, didn't need preparation. And I just very quietly, just as I worked my way up, you know, to get up the stairs, just left the bags by the, you know, the individuals with the sleeping people, and said, well, they'll wake up and find a nice little, you know.
Yeah. And Nina and Yvette, we are coming up on the 8 o'clock hour. I feel like there's a plan to move forward from this conversation. A reminder to those of you who weren't here at the beginning, or to let you know that our second presenter had to cancel this evening. So the only thing you all have left on the agenda is other business, if you want to ask if anybody has that.
Yes, would love to hear. Thank you so much, Norman
Thank
and
you so much.
Sherry and
Yeah.
Madeline, for sharing with us the wonderful work that you're doing
Thank you.
with Sharp. We really appreciate this, and we'll share it out with the larger community board at our next meeting in February. But as Sean said, we want to take this opportunity to see if anyone, any board members or committee members have any other business that they would like to talk about at this meeting, or any topics of interest for presentations at our future meetings that they'd like to hear about.
Gosh, I was actually really had been hoping that we would be hearing from the other presenter about the you know, situations with you know, with Brookdale and stuff. I hear it from the patients, and just a tremendous amount of anxiety and tremendous amount of anger. So I hope that we will be able to reschedule that. I think that's that's a big concern and big issue.
Yeah, hope so too. We'll certainly try to follow up and get it rescheduled. Tonight, I guess it bears mentioning there is a public hearing on the SUNY downstate threats of closure. So we will get that report from Chair Cesar at our next meeting. But if there's anything that pops up from that, in the meantime, I'll get it out to the board.
Thank you. Gosh, other things. Nothing
Well,
right on the top of my
it's
head.
an ongoing question. You know where to find us, and send in, like Florencia actually got us the contact for the presentation that couldn't go forward tonight, but please just, when you're out and about and you're meeting people and you think they would make a good presentation in addition to this or any other committee, refer them and we'll do the follow-up.
Okay, is there any plan to do, like the lunch and learn type of thing? I haven't heard anything about that for this winter.
There isn't at this time, but if the board wants to take initiative on that, the office will support it for
Okay.
sure.
The other, I suppose another option might be to see if some of the people that are involved in the diabetes prevention counseling could just come and talk at a meeting, and then of course that's available on on the YouTube later.
Yeah, okay, I'll take a note on that. And then just because it bears mentioning, every time we gather, the 18th Annual Youth Conference is scheduled for March 12th at the Flatbush Y. And then we will be holding our nonprofit roundtable, I think in May this year.
Okay. No, that ought to keep us busy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Norman, for just, being in touch and being so responsive, and really nice to meet you, Sherry and Madeline, and I put it in the chat, but please reach out and let's keep talking.
All right. Thank you all. Take care. Stay warm. Stay warm.
You too.
Sure.
Thank you. Great meeting.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone, for attending tonight. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thanks, everyone. Stay warm. Thank you for being here.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. It was lovely to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
How do I get out of here?